Hello, everybody who has arrived now. Welcome to today's Conversation Corner, which is making support a whole company sport. And if you have attended like a support-driven event over the last couple of years, you might have come to a Conversation Corner in actual real life. It's basically lots of support people sitting around in a rough circle on chairs of varying levels of comfort, depending on where we are, just talking together about the work of support in an open and a relaxed way. And that is something that's a little bit harder to do on Zoom, but we're trying to achieve sort of the same thing here today. So as we have a chat through these topics today, just pop into the chat function at any time, share your own thoughts or your questions or your stories or your ideas. We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the event. If we have time at the end, and at the risk of breaking Zoom, we might even try to get some of you up onto the microphone too, if you want to. But for right now, let's just talk about this nerdiest of sports, whole company support. And it's not a complicated idea, really, if you've never heard about it before. I mean, it's just having people who aren't on the support team getting into the queue to help customers. And that's basically it, right? Thanks for coming to the webinar. See you next time. Bye. But no, of course, in reality, the practical implementation of it is so much more complicated than that. And that's really what we're going to get into today. And to help me do that, I am shared by some smart people here who have some expertise, and we'll be also joined by a few other people as we go along. But let's start with the people who are here right now, starting with you, Christy.
Hey, I'm Christy. I'm on the support team at Help Scout. I've been here for about 7.5 years, which is a really long time for a millennial to not quit their job. So I really like it here. And I've owned the whole company support initiative for like 5 or 6 years now.
Fantastic. And Alison.
Yeah, hi, I'm Allison Groves. I'm also with Christy on the support team here at Help Scout. I focus on a lot of customer education. That's kind of how I spend my day to day, but have done, not only do we do whole company support here, but I've done it in the past at other companies. I was previously at Zapier, where they famously did it with hundreds and hundreds of people while also using Help Scout. So yeah, happy to chat through this large, I think, deceptively large topic.
My name's Matt. I am on the content team here at Help Scout, but I previously ran a support team for many years and tried, I would say, attempted some forms of whole company support. And obviously I get involved with it here at Help Scout as well. And we also have behind the scenes Hillary. She's in the chat. She'll be coordinating things. Hillary's also my boss. So if you could just provide totally genuine and unrehearsed compliments about Help Scout's content in the chat right about now, that would be great. Thank you. But the three of us, we're going to have a little chat about whole company support from the support team perspective. And we've got a couple of other folks who've recorded some thoughts for us that we'll play in a bit. And then later on, we'll be joined by Help Scout CEO, Nick, and our VP of Marketing, Kristen, and they're going to share their perspectives as non-support people who are involved in making whole company support happen in various ways. But let's really get into it. When I think about whole company support, the first thing for me that comes to mind is Hawaii, obviously. And I will tell you why. In my last job, we had company retreats, and this particular retreat was in Hawaii. Yeah. But we were an Australian company, and we had lots of North American staff, so it was technically in the middle, so there was a reason for it. And I just remember being in this big hotel conference room with a bunch of tables and chairs. And I had a couple of wireless hotspots, you know, because the hotel internet is always a bit rubbish. And the whole support team is in that room, and we're just working the queue because we had to, right? We'd all just traveled halfway around the world. But the customers, very rudely, don't stop asking questions while you're on the plane. So we had this big catch-up session. Fine, it has to be done. But literally right outside that conference room, through these big glass windows that we're sitting in front of, we could see the hotel pool just in the beautiful sunshine. And that pool absolutely jam-packed with the whole rest of the company. All these pale tech nerds out there going slowly bright red, drinking, chatting away to each other. And for me, I think that was the exact moment when I became a radicalized whole company support believer. That was my story. I think everyone's got their own story about it. The person at Help Scout who's really driven whole company support is Christy. So I want to start there. Christy, how did whole company support even start at Help Scout?
Yeah, we always say whole company support has always been kind of part of our DNA because when we were really tiny, before my time, it was just the founders and the engineers. The whole company was doing support because there wasn't a support team. So it was sort of baked in from day one. And then as we grew and got a support team, we just kept that as part of what we do. Um, and similar thing, when we get together in person for retreats, it's just sort of a necessity that everyone is helping out with support. Otherwise, the support team wouldn't get to participate in retreats. And also with us building help desk software, like customer support is the heart of everything we're all about. So we feel like everybody in the company should be involved in customer support. So it's just really just woven into kind of everything we are and kind of always has been. So it's been more just a matter of maintaining it and evolving it as the company grows.
Alison, what do you think non-support people even get out of it? Like, is there anything in that for them, or is it just for the support team?
Yeah, I've had some really wonderful experiences with it at really small companies too. So, like I mentioned, I started on this road at Zapier, and I was hire number 13 at Zapier, and now I think there are over 1,000 people. So we did it even back then, and it was a really wonderful thing to either be sitting with someone in person or even virtually, and them having that aha moment of like, this is the experience that a customer is having, and here's how we might solve for that, or leadership getting a better idea of who your customers actually are, things that are really outside of their purview, just because we're all in our own sort of myopic day-to-day world. And doing that, bringing the customer into it, I have found allows a different perspective, but also, different ideas start floating around of how to solve problems, what we're building, what we're making. And I've had some really great like one-on-one interactions, even with engineers who have we've been working through a problem for weeks, and you just sit down and focus on it, and they hear about it from the customer perspective, and they're like, oh, well, let's just do this. And then it's just, it's sort of miraculously done. So there's just so much upside to it. Can't be anything but a huge proponent of it.
Yeah, there's like a few key benefits that I always kind of come back to as our guiding principles. It shortens the feedback loop from our customers. It keeps the customer at the center of everything we're doing, and it deepens every team's understanding of the product. And then it strengthens the company because we're having cross-team collaboration. And then all of this ultimately helps us build a better product. And then the secret bonus that I don't share with the whole company, but the support team knows that it's a benefit to us too, because it's making our work more visible and more valued by the rest of the company, and kind of ensures that we have a seat at the table as product decisions are being made.
Yeah, I remember having at my previous job having the founders. They just decided that they wanted to do a week of support, and it had been a few years probably since they had done that. And the next week, suddenly a bunch of bugs were getting fixed and prioritized, because they're like, "Oh, this is terrible. Why haven't we done something about this?" And what I didn't say was like, "Remember when I told you 4 billion times about that before?" It makes a difference to personally feel the pain, right? Now, whole company support, it's sort of something that if you've been in a smaller company, it's almost automatic. Like at the start, everyone does support because you have to, because there's 3 people, and as soon as you get more than 2 customers, you need an extra person in there helping. But as you grow, it gets more and more difficult because there's more and more people doing specialized jobs that don't really interact directly with customers most of the time. Chrissy, you've been doing this for quite a long time. Have you found that you've had to adapt like how we get people into the support queue over those years?
Yeah, it's kind of like ongoing maintenance, kind of keeping people buying in and involved, and it has evolved what it looks like to support them in that process as people's roles are changing. And so yeah, I it feels just I have like this love-hate relationship with whole company support, right? Because in truthfully, it would be easier to just not do it, right? But I believe so much in the value of it that I keep sticking with it and keep working at evolving it as the company grows. But yeah, it's definitely ongoing. Like when we first started it, We had, I believe I don't know if it was like monthly shifts. It was like very regular for everyone in the company. And we've had to evolve that as, maybe we go through very hectic seasons. Like during the pandemic, we were like, maybe we need to pull back on this because everyone just needs like one less thing on their plate. So we've just had to like adapt over time. And like right now, some of our teams do it monthly, some of our teams do it quarterly, just based on what like the leadership of that team feels like is manageable. So yeah, we have to be really adaptive in order to keep it sustainable, I think, over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get into a little bit is like the why, like it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort to make that happen. And I think about even at home with kids, sometimes like I want you to understand how much work goes into maintaining this household that you live in, and they're just not going to understand it if we always do all the things in the house. And so it takes 50 times as long to get them to do one thing, but then
Mhm.
they experience, oh, like actually this is a big job keeping the house clean. And I need them to know that. And so it's sometimes worth the pain of going through the process of encouraging them to do it and hand holding and maybe having to fix the thing afterwards. And I feel
Yeah,
like it pretty much is the same thing with support. Like it's not easy to do, but it's the value you get out of it from the support team's perspective is worth the effort most of the time.
it's a good analogy. And not only is it worth the work of the support team facilitating it, but it's worth the work of the other teams doing it. I always compare it to going to the gym. Like maybe you're not really feeling it and it's going to be hard and you don't really want to, but like it will pay off and it's a good investment. I think that's what it feels like for a lot of people because it is outside of their comfort zone.
Absolutely. And we will get into, there's a couple of questions in the chat there. We'll get into the specifics of how you do it because I think everyone probably in support team right now is having the same fear of like, oh my God, there are some people in my company who I do not want talking to customers, right? And definitely that's true. But there are lots of different variations on whole company support. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the retreat perspective. Alison, you've obviously done this as well. Maybe we'll start with you there. When we're on company retreats, why are we doing what we call power hours? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I Power hours are something that I'm sure Christy will understand when I say I have a love-hate relationship with. I kind of view retreat week as like the 1 or 2 weeks a year where I'm not talking to customers because I deeply want everyone else at the company to be doing that because there's just so much value in it. And so I actually spend a lot of my time at retreats encouraging that. And we do, so when we're all in person, several of us will sit down with other like engineers, marketers, whoever is, doing support in that power hour and just talk through things with them. And so much value comes out of that hour where I'm not necessarily talking to customers, but I'm talking about them with other members of our team. And I love doing that stuff because it's that sort of like very selfish validation of like, yeah, see what's going on. But, bigger picture, it's really wonderful to have that moment of solidarity with someone that you maybe only talk to once a year at retreat, but you sit together in that hour and you work through problems and they get to see those customer problems as well. And it's really special, I think.
Have either of you had the experience of someone who's not in support having done their shift, coming back with a different attitude toward the way that they work with support in the future?
I mean, I won't speak for Christy, but everyone that I see when I finish an hour, and I'll call out our director of partnerships, Nicole, who I sat with on our last retreat and worked for an entire hour with. And when she was done, she was like, this job is hard. So there's a lot of that, which does make me feel good.
Yeah, Christy, can you think of anybody who's had that sort of strong reaction to the experience of doing support?
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like almost everyone. I mean, yeah, they come away feeling like they learned something new and also like a new appreciation for the work we do. And that's very validating and feels very worthwhile.
Absolutely. I think there's a side benefit. In a sense, often the actual answering of customer conversations is like, well, that's a nice bonus to have because support team knows eventually we will get to those customers and we can do it, right? And the person doing it who's on the engineering team or on the finance team is probably not going to do as good a job as a support person would with that conversation. So in a sense, you're a little bit, and maybe this is controversial, in a little bit, you are sacrificing a little bit of customer experience in the short term for a big improvement to overall customer experience in the very long term. If you think about the impact that that person having a bit more of a customer perspective is going to have in their job for the next year after they've done that shift. Would you agree or disagree?
Quality
Oh,
control built in because people aren't going in and just sending emails willy-nilly. The support team is kind of checking their drafts before they hit send. So I would argue there's very little downside, really.
Yeah, and it also gives you the opportunity that I love to like talk to that other teammate on their level and like have pull out the parts of that customer interaction or that product interaction or whatever and kind of shape it towards what they know and what they understand and what their job function is. So, when you sit down with someone on marketing and be like, yeah, these are the types of questions that people ask. This is how they ask them. And then we can talk through things in a little more specialized way, where an engineer you'd have more of a technical conversation with, which are also fun to have. So it's neat to like have kind of formulate your discussion while you're in that moment specific to what that other teammate does. And it also allows you to think in different ways too, which is fun.
absolutely, it does. Now, we've also got a couple of friends from other companies who we asked to share their own experiences. And so I'm going to ask Hillary to tee up that first one now for Mercer, and we can just hear about her perspective.
I think one of the most valuable things about having everyone or a majority of the members of your company get involved in the inbox is getting empathy for the customer and understanding how what you do actually impacts them, right? Like there's a level of separation between most of the other teams and your customer. Your customer success team, your support team, renewals, and sometimes sales all have direct contact. But, product and engineering and all of that, like they hear from your mouth what the customers are saying, but being able to be in the inbox and see what's actually coming up can have a huge impact. Like they can feel firsthand the level of frustration that comes from having a broken feature, or the level of excitement that someone gets when something new is introduced to them or something that's really going to help them is introduced to them. So I think that that's probably the biggest value of doing any kind of all hands support or all hands triage or anything like that. And I think that a lot of companies think of it as like a way to get the support team out of debt. But actually, if you flip the perspective and, think about it as a way to actually help those other teams get really important insights, it makes it appear to be much more valuable. Everyone seems to understand the intrinsic value of that over like, oh, we just need to help the support team get out of hot water.
That empathy for the customer, is so hard to hold on to as you get further and further away in your job from actually having to deal with customers. They become less of a real person and more of a abstract idea of someone out there paying the bill for the thing. But we've also got a video from Sarah Betts, and she's talking about empathy too, but in a slightly different way. So let's see that one.
I once thought that anybody could do support. It's just talking to people, right? And if you understand the product, you're good to go. I have since learned that that is not necessarily the case, and there is a reason that we have professional support people. That being said, I do think that it is very valuable to have people across the company see what it's like in support. So some things that I do is I love to have people come shadow a support agent for a couple of hours, whatever works for their schedule. This highlights a couple of things. They get to see the conversations. They also get to see the skills that it takes to provide good support. They get to see how quickly support agents respond, how quickly they take in information. And one thing I always hear back is, they have so many tabs and they are so fast and they just know where things are.
So many tabs. I feel like when I stopped doing support full time, I had to like unlearn about 4 million tabs. I still do have 3 browsers going at all the time though. But to Sarah's point, I think shadowing agents is another way to get people to actually have that interaction with the customer without having to do it. So definitely sometimes people are not confident in answering customers directly. And Christy, you talked about, having a QA step in between where someone else is going to review it before it goes out. So that takes some of that fear away. But are there other ways that you can adapt a whole company support that might make it suit different situations?
Yeah, I love the idea of shadowing. I think that especially if you're like trying to introduce a new whole company support program at your company, that feels like a way less intimidating way to do it, I think. And then also you could batch it, it wouldn't have to be one-on-one. I could have 5 people shadowing me in the queue at one time, just for the sake of everyone's time efficiency. So yeah, I like the idea of kind of figuring out what are people's like comfort level and communication ability level, and then kind of adapting the plan. And maybe after like 6 months of shadowing, then maybe you could try to ease into like maybe someone could try drafting an email. So again, kind of keeping that mindset of like, how do we need to adapt this over time to make it sustainable?
And there's some questions in the chat there about like, how do you do anything to prepare people? Are they getting training? For example, I know that when you join Help Scout, you do some basically support work pretty early on in your orientation period. Can you speak a little bit to that, or Alison, if you've got that experience?
Yeah, so everyone who's hired at Help Scout, whether you're a designer or a VP of marketing, you do support onboarding. So we set up a Help Scout inbox full of pretend customer questions that are based on real questions that we frequently get. And they go through, they spend about 4 hours total, I think, across a couple of days, drafting up replies. So it's giving them practice, like learning how to look through our saved replies, looking through our documentation, just sort of building those skills of like, where do I look for information that customers need? And then they save their draft reply and they'll drop it in Slack. And then they have a support buddy review their draft and give feedback of, love your formatting. It's easy to read. I would also add a link to this article that on our doc site that has more information, that kind of thing. So they're getting like real-time feedback on their writing. So of course, that's just like the tip of the iceberg because Help Scout is a big product. So there's a lot to learn. So there's kind of like that initial training, and then there's the ongoing piece where, depending on the team, you might be doing whole company support on a monthly or quarterly basis. But it's formatted similarly where during a regular power hour, we call them, you would go into our real live queue and pick any customer question and do your best to add a draft reply to that conversation. And then again, you drop it in Slack for somebody on the support team to review before you fire it off. So yeah, but I think that initial onboarding is really important, especially just for like setting the tone of like, this is something we value and we consider talking to customers to be part of everyone's job.
And Alison, it doesn't necessarily require you to answer the most complicated technical questions, right? When you're sitting down with people during a power hour to help them do some support, are they able to like pick something which is a little bit more relevant to their area of the business maybe?
Yeah, I'm a big, loud proponent of everyone at your company should at least have a baseline understanding of what your product or service or whatever it is that you're supporting. Every single human should at least be able to give an elevator pitch on what that thing is and what it does. And whole company support is just another way to sort of back that up and solidify that. So even down to what Christy and I would consider to be like, I could answer this question in literally 10 seconds. Like that's something that is great for someone else to know, because that's sort of the baseline of the knowledge that they need to know about your product or service. So even that is the kind of thing that like gets me excited about whole company support, because I so desperately want every single human at the company, even down to the people, to the HR team, to like know the baseline about the product. And that is a great way to sort of give them that repetition and that sort of, when you physically do the job of writing the response and sending the response, you're going to remember that thing and it's going to stick with you. So no matter how easy it is, like I'm a big fan of that.
And there is a privilege for Help Scout of the fact that the product is also the thing you're using to do the support. So it is self-reinforcing in a way that some other companies don't have that benefit, obviously. We're going to bring on a couple of other people to this conversation now. But while we do that, if there's any other questions that you wanted to ask or stories you wanted to tell about your own whole company support, pop those in there now. I know Buffer, Corinna from Buffer saying that they have a particular method for assigning 1 or 2 kind of support advocates per table at retreat, which I think we've done that at Help Scout too, haven't we? Everybody in a conference room kind of situation.
Hello.
Hello, Kristen. You give yourself a little introduction, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Bryant-Smith. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Help Scout, and I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the United States of A. So that's a little bit about me. I've been at Help Scout for about 4 years and have gone through, a whole company support onboarding, as Christy mentioned earlier, do monthly power hours with our marketing team. So super excited to talk about what that's meant for our team and how to kind of get other folks on board outside of the world of support.
Absolutely. And we've got one other person here, Nick Francis. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Nick. I'm co-founder and CEO at Help Scout. I guess I've been here for all 13 years. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and I love talking about whole company support. So I can't wait. Let's do this.
All right. Well, I imagine that you probably have answered a customer question or 2 in your time. Basically,
yes, I haven't run the report recently, but it's in the thousands.
Absolutely. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you would have everybody in the company do support, but what does whole company support mean to you?
It means a tremendous amount. And I want to make maybe just a couple of points. The first thing, so before I was CEO, I was just a builder. I was just somebody building a product and building a customer support tool for customer support teams. And so I'm passionate about this area, this problem, this challenge, this thing that we all work on every day. And so at my core, I just feel like I need to be able to finish my own customer sentences in order to make good decisions. And believe it or not, that has translated to my role now as CEO. They don't let me write code anymore. It would break the product, I'm sure. So I now operate as CEO, but I find that I'm still in the queue almost every day, getting a sense for the pulse of what's happening, what the sentiment is among our customers. Because ultimately, I feel as though I can make better decisions when I understand the voice of the customer. And that's something that we've been talking a lot about in the company, is particularly over the last 6 to 12 months. And there's some reasons for that our customers will be aware of soon enough. But we've started to realize, wow, what if one of the most important missions that we have as a business is to amplify the voice of the customer in every corridor of the business? Would it be possible for everybody to make better quality decisions if the voice of the customer was present at all times and you were able to learn from what the customer support team is seeing every day in the queue, right? What if everybody in the organization could understand that at some level to inform better decision-making in the business? That's something that we've become very excited about, because I can just speak from my own experience. I make better decisions when I've been talking with customers. I feel like we can just we can show up for customers better. We're thinking through problems differently through their lens when that's part of the process. So whether it's what we've been talking about, whether it's like a shadow program or a shift where you're involved in doing whole company support, however we execute on that, the core thing that's so important to communicate is that it's important for everybody in the organization to hear, learn from the voice of the customer. So that's why I'm so passionate about this.
And have you been able to, I guess I've got a question about when people start and you're hiring people into senior positions, are you explaining to them, like, part of your job, you are going to be doing some support at some times? Is that part of the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Because building a beloved brand really starts with customer support, in my opinion. Every beloved brand has great customer service. If I named off the top 5 brands that I love, every single one of them is amazing at customer support. That's a cornerstone of building a beloved brand. And if we're all here to try to build a beloved brand, then it's important that we kind of coach people up on day one of their time at Help Scout to operate in that way. We are a customer first business. That means you're going to learn to use the product. You're going to learn to understand our customers and see the world through their eyes. It's so critical. And whether you're, like we said, like VP of marketing, like Kristen is, it doesn't matter. Like every decision that you're making should take into account the voice of the customer when you're operating in a customer first way. And so for us, so much revolves around the queue, as we call it, and just being able to learn from kind of what we're hearing and what our customers are experiencing.
Well, and it's so valuable that Nick has this enthusiasm and the people he's hiring have this enthusiasm, because it trickles down. Because I have no actual authority at Help Scout. I can't make anybody do whole company support, but because our leadership is saying this is valuable and we need to set aside time for it, and it's not an extracurricular, it's part of your job, that makes it possible. I think it would be really hard to implement at a company where the leadership was seeing it as an inconvenience or not a good use of time. So just the fact that Nick and Kristen are here is really telling of how our leadership values it, and that makes it possible to sustain it in the long run.
Right. We can make people do things.
Thanks.
I mean, we can make suggestions, you know.
That's right.
But I think you're right, Christy, and just to chime in here, yeah, I've been at companies before where marketing feels very removed from product, and like the need for product knowledge feels pretty disparate from the work, which can feel odd. Like it feels at odd for a company that's really product led to have people at the company that don't really know how the product work, and most importantly, what value it adds or where there's opportunities for improvement, how to position those in an ongoing way. And I think that to Nick's point, the more that we can do to surface the voice of the customer, whether that's through whole company support, through other ways in terms of, you know, operationalizing it with meetings and that sort of thing, making sure that people have channels in Slack to share out customer stories, which I love, is another way to get people into the queue, is like linking these, you know, conversations that we have with customers into the customer story channel on Slack. You know, those are other ways that we just stay abreast of like what is going on with the customer base. Is the messaging that we're putting out there resonating? Are they having a totally different experience in real life in the product than what we're talking about when we position it on the website? Because that's a problem, right? And so I think that whole company support is a really nice way to kind of keep us honest in that way.
Absolutely. We've also got a video from a different CEO, Wade from Zapier. Could we watch that one now, please?
Hey folks, so at Zapier, almost from day one, we did all hands support. We would toss folks a Help Scout login and say, hey, go to town, take any ticket you can, solve as much as you can. If you get stuck, ask a question in chat and we'll help you out. This was a hugely influential ritual inside of the business. It forced everyone to understand both our customers' pain points and the product really well. It was especially fruitful for engineers to get in and do support, because they would often just fix things right away. Minor nuances, bugs, things like that in another company might end up on a roadmap and take months to go fix. But instead, engineers with high agency would just say, you know what, I'm going to handle that today. And as a result, I think it created a speed of shipping, a higher quality of experience, a fast improvement inside the product, and a customer experience that was just incredibly delightful. And so I'd recommend any early stage company to do something similar and scale it as far as you can, because it is such a powerful ritual for making your product better and helping your company understand your customers and your product super, super well. Ciao.
Absolutely. Did that trigger any response for you, Nick?
Wade gets it, and we've talked about this, right? But yeah, Wade absolutely gets it. That's very much been our experience, and it's so cool to see other leaders sort of have the same sort of appreciation for this tactic, for this strategy as we do.
Can I ask you a question, Nick? Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah.
Going back to Christy's point about how, you know, may not have, maybe in our role and not have any sort of leadership power. But I came to you in last time we were in person, and we had a very impassioned conversation about something that was really important to me. and we talked it out. And I think that is possible for others to do that, right? Like if you aren't doing this at your company yet, but you understand how important it can be from the CEO perspective, like I know that you would love at any point for someone to come to you and be like, hey, I think we're missing out on this really valuable opportunity, and here's why.
Yeah. You know, that's why I like to say that we believe behind every beloved brand is great customer support, because not everybody makes that connection. You know, if you are in a support team that seems or feels somewhat minimized by leadership, or maybe not given the sort of autonomy or influence in the organization as you feel is necessary, I think if you go to leadership and try to make a case for something like whole company support, I think it's really important to associate it to the broader company's success. You know, one thing that we really like to say that I believe is 100% true, it's certainly been true in our case, is that great customer support is your most effective marketing channel. Are you making the most of that channel, right? Because your customers are the ones who are going to talk to other people about your product. What are they going to say? So this is about not just providing good customer support. This is about building your company and building your brand, right? Every CEO wants to build a beloved brand. Everyone wants to build a great company that does right by the customer. And we just have to help them understand some of the trade-offs that are necessary in order for that to happen, right? So the more clear you can be about, hey, we are aligned, that we want to both build a beloved brand that people love. How do we do that? Well, I think we need to amplify the voice of the customer in every corridor such that every team is empowered to make decisions with them in mind. Here's what it would take to do that, right? And you can start to outline some of those cases. If I have a free 30 minutes, I'll join you and I'll try to help make the case with you. But at the same time, I really think it's just about showing them the broader vision, because a lot of leaders, unfortunately, look at customer support as a cost center. And to be honest, that's a previous generation way of thinking. That's not the way that modern customer support works. It's not a cost center. It is your most effective marketing channel. And if you're not making the most of it, we all know that acquiring new customers is more expensive than ever today. So you better damn make sure that your most effective marketing channel is working for you.
100%. Speaking of marketing channels, Kristen, VP of Marketing,
Yes.
in the support, in our part of the organization, we do power hours, more frequently than some other parts of the company. Can you speak about why that is and what we get out of it?
Yeah, so the company at large, to keep me honest here, Chrissy, we're doing twice a year customer support, once during retreat, quarterly, okay. And we were doing kind of once during the retreat, quarterly customer support. That's how we were doing it. And I felt like marketing as a team was still a little bit removed from the product and how quickly the product was evolving when we were following that cadence. And for us, we have last year we made a change to our brand. I don't know if y'all noticed this, but one of the big pieces of the change to our brand is the higher fidelity of product visuals and product experience that's represented on our website. And that requires a higher level of product knowledge and understanding on the part of our whole marketing team compared to when we had kind of a brand that was operating completely removed from the product. It was more illustration based. And so with kind of that advent, I realized that, if you're going to be designing screens and kind of walking through videos where you're trying to show a real flow of the product, not only do you need to be in there yourself, which is the meta part of our whole company support, but then it's also that, we needed to hear and understand, again, if those value propositions were really resonating with people, what were people's pain points, how can we get that directly, as opposed to relying on kind of the grapevine of communications that exist within probably every company that's represented here, whereas like, your support team might do a readout, maybe your sales team does a readout of things they want on the product roadmap, and then that gets passed down and shuffled down and watered down, and it's just not as powerful as like kind of dealing with that directly with a customer, kind of understanding what workarounds exist when we do have a mismatch in expectations with a customer. And so that's really what motivated us to do it on a monthly basis. I think it also kind of brings you closer to the other folks on the team that are doing it more frequently. So our engineers also do a whole company support on the same schedule, which again, Christy manages for us. But I think it's just kind of fun to be in the queue with different people every single time, and then try to race to see how many questions you can answer. The answer is always 2 for me, unfortunately. I did start using AI drafts and I've gotten up to 3 when we're with the AI draft. So if we want to use that as a stat on the marketing site, we probably can. But it's usually not. It's definitely not as many as Nick gets through. And I love questions about billing. It's just my sweet spot where I just can just dive in, understand. Okay, users, permissions, billing. That's my stuff right there. But yeah, so that's really why we made the change.
Kristen is 50% more productive with AI drafts. Put it on the website.
Just Kristen. Like, I'm gonna have my face there and everything. And you can too if you're only in the queue once a month.
Yeah, hard to sustain a 50% growth over time. Have either of you had a conversation with a customer during your like power hours or your just support queue work that has changed the way you thought about something to do with the company? Nick, you want to take that one?
Oh my gosh, on a regular basis. On a regular basis. So I guess I could give a recent example, but something that Wade said in his video that was so endearing, and I remember very well too, was particularly like in the earlier days when a customer reports a bug and you're like, oh, I'll just go fix that bug and ship it. And it happens like right away. And you're like, hey, so-and-so, I fixed the bug. And that is like the ultimate level of delight. It's really hard to do that at scale, but I would like to think that we've tried to invent some tactics and ways of prioritizing that stuff. But I remember last week, Katie, one of the managers on what we call C team, our customer support team, she referred me to a conversation with a customer where they were really confused about a billing situation. And this actually had to do with Support Agent AI, which is a company we acquired last year. So it was on a separate website that we aren't really paying attention to. And the customer was right. The billing was confusing. What they were trying to figure out was not clear. And I was instantly able to go to one of my co-founders and one of the engineers and be like, hey, can we do this? Can we fix this? Can we make this one adjustment? And they shipped in 15 minutes. And so that still happens from time to time. And it's so rewarding when we can just do right by the customer in that way and just kind of cut through the BS, right? And make sure it doesn't end up like Wade was saying on the backlog and stuck for months at a time. Like for the team to have a voice to say, hey, this needs to be fixed. It's a really quick thing. Can we just get to it? That stuff influences our day-to-day decision-making on a regular basis. But what I find is that even when you're operating at scale and when you have data that helps inform decisions, we all like to pretend that we make data-driven decisions every day. But at the same time, when you're building a product and you're trying to delight customers, data has a really long feedback loop. Like by the time you have a report that tells you something's wrong or something's right or something's working, something's not, it's been way too long. If you're talking to the customers on a proactive basis about that exact same thing, it shortens the feedback loop to be a small fraction of the time it would take for you to learn that thing. And so I always like to use talking to customers as a shortcut to figuring out a problem in the business that we need to solve and then going and solving it.
That makes me think about the lucky customers who have written in about doc site styling while our creative director is in the queue. Because if Matt Plays, who leads our brand design team here, if he's in the queue for his whole company support thing and someone writes in having issues with styling their doc site, he has been known to just make a design for them, to just like create the CSS and delight the customer. And it's one of those things that's like again, like a small win. That's not a productized win. That's not like a thing that is scalable by any means, but it's like, what an awesome experience for that customer if that does happen. And Pato, to kind of change your question a little bit, there are moments, I'm sticking with billing, so I don't know how like transformative the experience is for people that are asking about billing when I'm trying to stick to those questions. But the empathy that I feel like I build a lot is with our other C team, like our colleagues on C team. And I think that's really important because I think that within a business, you can get very focused on your goals and the path that your team is, kind of responsible for, and you lose sight of like the connectivity. So I know like last week, Christy and I were in a thread in Slack where we were talking about the odds, the ends of the spectrum that marketing serves versus customers team. Like the C team is dealing with all the squeaky wheels all day long. It's the very vocal minority that's writing in to the queue. And marketing is always solving for messaging for the like quiet majority, the people who are okay with the status quo, the people like most people that don't have a problem, that are going to completely self-serve through everything. Like that's who we write content for. And if you don't talk to each other, that can feel like a very vast gap. And so I think that it's just a nice reality check for people who deal with different groups of customers to get into the queue and see like, okay, this is, it's not like you can't just toss the information aside that C team is trying to raise. You can't ignore it, and you have to like let that slowly influence the work that you're doing. And so I think for me, it's more so about understanding how when there's edge cases that might feel very apparent to our support team that we typically ignore in messaging, like how does that weave through and how can that pull through on our website or in more direct customer comms that we're sending.
It's just exposure to different perspectives that makes so many decisions better. We've got one more video to share from Jacqueline Beal, if we could bring that one up now.
So interestingly enough, here at Copy AI, whole company support is something that's very much like a vein throughout the whole business. So it's not just marketing, it's not just customer success or support that's responsible for this. It's everyone from dev and engineering to product, marketing, sales, you name it. So in terms of how we like to tackle that here is every morning, I simply just sit down for an hour. I go through support threads. I read what's going on in our customer help channels in Slack. And really what this allows me to do is really dive deep into what are people asking of our support team? What questions do they have? What challenges are they bumping up against? What is it that we as a team, again, a whole team, not just customer success or support, can do to support users, to support our customers, to support people who may even want to upgrade to a paid version of our product? But the reason why we see this as really important is not only because you're able to get so many insights from users, but you don't have to wait around to do formal customer research. So one of the biggest challenges I've faced in my career as a marketer, especially transitioning away from roles like content into lifecycle, is getting insights from customers is, for a lot of us, often something very formal through, say, like formal conductive customer research. But the reality is you can just go and find those insights yourself. So my best advice, if you're on a smaller team or you may not have the resources to necessarily go out and conduct formal customer research, sit with your support team, sit in on sales calls and demos, and talk to your users, dive into NPS survey results, and start to see what continuously comes up. This is super, super insightful. It can also help you to create better content. You may be able to create better content for your blog, for social, for macros that your CS team can use. Whatever the case may be, there's a whole whackload of insights to be found in what is essentially free customer research. I find it also helps ingratiate you with your customers. If you can put a face to the name or a name to the face, people get to know you, they get to understand you, and they kind of get to see like a more human side of your company. You do not have to be like a CS professional or experienced in customer support. You just go right in there, dive in, and get those insights. Hope that helps.
Super helpful. Actually, it ties into a question that Anthony's asked, and I might throw this one to you, Nick. So he's saying that he works at an agency with about 20 people and there's one person basically doing all the customer support and nobody else really wants to be, bothered with it. And just think about like, how do you get people around the idea of why they should be spending time in the queue?
Anthony, I feel for you, my friend. That's a hard thing. I think it's really important to observe how that's showing up for customers. Is that working? Is one person helping out all of the clients and nobody else really being involved, saying they're busy with other things. I wonder how that shows up for customers. My sense is that it probably doesn't work out so well. And if that's the case, I think that's really interesting data that may help to illuminate, hey, what do we care about as a company? As a marketing agency, I can only imagine that you care deeply about earning and maintaining client business. And if that's the case, then who's to say it's not everyone's job to earn and maintain that business over time, and to understand like some of the challenges that they may be running into. So I truly think that this is a crucial moment for the company to determine what they care about, right? What are the company's priorities? Because everybody has a lot of work to do. Everybody on this call has a lot of work to do. I'm a CEO. I have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of reasons I have not to talk to customers every day or not to be in the queue. But at the same time, we've just chosen like the customer and their voice comes first. And we will hear that and try to synthesize that to the best of our ability before we prioritize anything else. And that's a difficult decision to make as a business. But at some level, I think that it'd be important to gather some of the data as to how that's working and showing up for your customers today, and then ask an honest question about whether that could be prioritized in the future differently.
And Anthony, as a marketer, I would just encourage the team to reframe the challenge as this does disrupt your work. I asked my team for an hour, but it's 1 hour every month, out of a lot of hours that they work every single month. And so, but it's like what the benefit of that hour does for the team working more cohesively with their colleagues, but also understanding the challenges that our customers have, make it completely worth it. So I wouldn't be afraid to like push forward a proposal that does suggest that this is worth our time and that we really focus the energy on building the case about why it's worth it, rather than making people feel like, oh, this isn't going to be disruptive. It will be, but it will absolutely be worth it.
It's also one of those things that like everybody rolls their eyes going into whole company support, and they exit whole company support juiced about something, right? Because they just learned something, they just had a clever interaction, they made a friend on C team, something awesome just happened in that hour that made it all worthwhile. But they had to be coerced into going into the room. It's one of those weird things. But I don't think anybody at Help Scout's ever had a bad time in whole company support. It's a blast.
100%. And we've actually hit our time there. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I think hopefully we've all got a pretty good sense of the value of getting those non-support people into the support queue. And you've got some maybe practical ideas on different ways that you could make it work and how to frame why you're doing it, what the value is for people. Hopefully you feel encouraged to test some of that in your own situation. So big thank you to all of our panelists today, and also to the people who recorded those videos for us. And thank you to everyone who's here live and paying attention, taking part in the chat. It does mean a lot. This has been recorded, of course. We'll be sending out the recording along with some additional links and resources to everybody who registered. So if you want to know more about how we do whole company support, those links will get you started.